Recorded at the Kitchen Studios. This is the Pencil Pushers Podcast.
Welcome, Leadheads. This is the Pencil Pushers Podcast, and I'm your humble host, Mike Rosado. Today, we are honored to have the lovely and talented Brittain Peck on the show. Brittain is an illustrator and animator whose focus is on narrative storytelling in the work he does not only do for his clients, but also the multiple personal projects he's digging into. We sit down and talk deep about what it means to be a working independent artist in today's commercialized world, and how to use that platform to help bring the world a little bit closer together, one drawing at a time. If this sounds like a talk for you, then have a seat, enjoy your walk, or drive safely and listen in as we talk with Brittain.
We are here with my good friend Brittain Peck. How are you doing, sir?
Doing great.
Really glad to have you on the podcast. I am a big fan of your work.
Oh, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I thought maybe this podcast, what we could do is I'd love to learn a little bit more of your story of how you got to where you are as an artist. And then, you know, you and I had been chiming back and forth via email about some potential things to talk about. You were very thorough. Thank you so much for sending that book of things we could talk about. No, but really, that's incredibly informative. So we're going to have some fun with this. But I think what I'd like to do is eventually talk about this topic of identity as an artist and also vision and how those two work in concert with each other when they're actively aware of the two. So let's talk. Let's start from the beginning. How'd you start getting into drawing, man?
I think probably my big brother. Before I start, thank you. This is awesome.
Yeah,
and, I appreciate
pleasure,
your
man.
helping me, just inviting me to be on this. But yeah, it's my older brother. I'm a middle child, and my brother's probably just under 2 years older than me, and I've got two kids now, and I watch my younger one just follow the older one around and want to do everything she does, and when they're not together, they miss each other, like more than just like, oh, I'm sad they're not here. It's like, what do you think they're doing right now? Like, it's a very actively like you feel like a part of you is not there. So I felt like that with my brother and my parents when we shared a room growing up, and so we had these.
Where was this? Where'd you grow up?
Greensboro,
Okay,
Greensboro,
cool.
North Carolina, and we shared this room, and I loved that. I never once thought it was a bad thing. I've advised my daughter against it, but just because she's like, I want to share a room. I'm like, I don't think you know what you're asking for, but
yeah, my brother and I had bunk beds, man. There were pluses and minuses for sure.
Yeah, we were bunk bed brothers as well.
Yeah.
We had these two drawing desks, and they were just desks more than anything. But my brother he just drew a lot, and I kind of learned that was a time that if I did my usual thing and just annoyed him, it wouldn't work. He'd just be like, "Stop, I'm drawing," and so I was like, "Oh, I might as well try that." And so the stuff I drew then was I've probably never drawn freer, you know. Now I kind of can't draw without a reason.
Yeah.
You know, it's very hard just for me to sit and sketch and doodle. Like, I love it, and I love those times when I do get lost in a drawing, but I've got to actively turn off my mind, you know, or turn off the rational part.
Yeah. Is that because you have it as a career now, and so you're constantly thinking that this is my mode of making money?
That, yeah. But even if it's just personal pleasure, it's more of a time thing, I think. It's like, all right, this time could be done with something else. So what's worth sitting here and spending time on? But because of that freedom, when I was a kid, I drew a character that my parents will still talk about. And I don't know if I dreamt about it. But then I remember maybe not the next day, but I was at dinner once, and just the family dining room, and I started talking about this character. I swore it was like an animated show that I had seen, and I was like, "Hey, have you guys heard of Side of the Pea?" And they were like, what? I said, yeah, side of the P. And so they were just like, keep going. Like, well, tell us more about it. And so I had just totally made up this.
They had like their phone close by, the nearest therapist that they could call. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's just his name was Saida. He was just a green pea, and he had a box haircut. I wanted a box haircut so bad when I was a kid, like J.R. Reed, the Charlotte Hornet. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. He wore like basketball shoes, and so he didn't have any really defining traits other than those, like personality or anything. So I gave him a sidekick named him after Peabo Bryson, the R&B singer.
Was that his full name, Peabo Bryson, or just Peabo?
Okay. Stop there. Peabo the mouse.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, he was a mouse.
Nice.
But he was an archer. So he was really good to take on adventures because he could like help you raid a castle or, like bring down.
Get through the cracks and get up to, the third floor faster than you can while you're fighting a dragon or something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if Saida ever actually did any of that, but Peabo was always ready. So I just had these two little characters. And so that's how like it all started. And then I remember my grandmother never had just plain paper. She was a very depression, the Great Depression. I don't know personal depression, but like Great Depression. Right. She survived.
She didn't have Great Depression. She, gotcha.
Yeah, survived the Great Depression. Right. And so in their house, there was just nothing thrown away. Like when my grandfather would get a pack of pens, the packaging was not trash. He would cut open the plastic bubble, put a tack in the wall, and then that was like the pen holder. Like everything was used. So when we would be at her house and we wanted to draw, she would give us cereal boxes or Lipton tea boxes. That was her big thing, was Lipton tea. Good Southern woman. Mm-hmm. So we would draw little things in all the...
On the inside, you mean? Like the inside where the cardboard didn't have any print?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where we were supposed to draw, and that's where we would start. But then,
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so then you draw on the other side where like you had these giant ice cubes. And so you get a little green pea and a little mouse, and that's just, they go crazy in there.
Right, yeah.
So that was just like the most nonsensical fun. And I think it just started with there. Like my brother was a big Chicago Cubs fan. He was a big Andre Dawson fan. And we played this Sega, not Sega Genesis, but the Sega before Sega Genesis.
Sega Master System.
Yes. Yeah, with like these red and black green grids on it and stuff.
I don't think I played that one.
Yeah, thank you for knowing that because I did not know it.
8-bit.
Yeah.
Side note from Max Trujillo.
But it had these we had a baseball game, and it had all these characters on it that were not real characters. Like they didn't have the licensing for like appearances and that. But he went through the entire league and made baseball cards for all these 8-bit characters. They gave you a name, and he made a whole baseball card thing. And so when I would watch him do that, I just started to see like you can do anything with this stuff, you know.
Yep.
He would make up his own car brands, and so I made car brands, and of course I made baseball cards too. I did everything he did, right? So yeah, it's just like starting to see where you could just do really anything with this. And then growing up, I just made friends in school that were artists and or that like to draw. You didn't call yourself an artist, and so we would just make up stuff.
Just elementary school still, or
yeah. And so I drew all through then, and then in middle school, that was probably until now, that was probably the time that I really connected with it the most. I remember this one drawing that I poured over, and I really, looking back, I was really just in love with it. And then I just sort of like stopped for a long time. I was.
What was the reason? Were you just focusing more on academics or something else, or?
Yeah, that and soccer. I was. This is total humble bragging, but I was a smart kid. I was a good athlete, and so if you've got a kid who's really good in math and science, and like I was getting it's really dorky stuff to admit, but I took Latin in middle school, and you get
it's not a dead language, man.
But I got like really high national Latin scores, so academically it was kind of, when you're choosing your courses for the year, it's kind of silly to recommend that kid take art, you know,
Right.
like
when you've got Latin to drive you forward,
to take you places, you know.
Backwards. No, I kid.
But yeah, so by the time I was in high school, it was just like I took my electives would be like traveling across county to take the math that is not offered in my home high school. It's the only place in the county that offers this math. You know? I like won our school's like science award. I got a like perfect score on like this calculus test and stuff, like, you know, so I placed out of math and science all through college. So art was just like not.
Wait, were your parents academic too? I mean, were they? I mean, was that their background or?
I mean, they both went to college, and my I mean I think I probably had a pretty academic upbringing. They weren't like professors or anything like that, but I mean, learning was definitely like it felt like second nature.
Yeah.
You know, like conversations we had maps around the house, like stuff that I just kind of took for granted growing up. So school never felt like, there was also a time in high school I got really sick and, my grades never slipped, which was really weird. And I actually I maintained like great grades throughout a pretty bad sickness. And, so it's just like really, that to me looking back was like, wow, it was sort of on autopilot in a weird way. But my brother was at NC State studying design, and in the summers he went to study animation at RISD. And I was like, are you learning? So secretly I always wanted to be an animator.
Yeah.
That was the dream. And I asked him when he came back from RISD one summer, I was like, are you learning what you would need to be an animator? And he was like, yes. I was like,
traditional or?
Either one, really.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was probably just starting to be computer.
Right.
And even with my own brother doing these things, I still didn't feel it was accessible to me. Mm-hmm. So then getting into college, I just loved it, though. And I just I always thought it would be cool to be a cartoonist. So when I was at UNC, I knew UNC had a really kind of good tradition of a very strong student paper. So I just tried to ask if I could draw for the student paper, and the way they would do it, and they said yes. So they gave you a day a week. So they would pick 5 artists. And so I don't remember what day.
Editorial, or were they political, or?
Kind of both. Yeah, whatever you wanted to. You just had to get it approved. And so I had a lot of fun with that. I had one day, but then they told everyone this, but they're like, there will be days other artists can't do it. If you want to be a standby artist, let us know.
Yeah.
So I would have weeks where I would do 2 or 3, and I loved it. I would come up with ideas. I kind of thrived on. They'd be like, "Hey, can you give us something in the morning by 8?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I can." And so that was a blast. And then the other fun thing about that was pushing the boundaries. So this one my dad still talks about. UNC allowed Playboy to do casting on campus one year. And
what?
I thought that was pretty for students, not just like random people coming onto campus. Just a casting location. It was like, no, to specifically get students. And and I remember thinking that was really backwards for a pretty forward-thinking institution. So I decided to just have the chancellor in drag and beheaded in a cartoon.
Damn.
Yeah. It's really harsh to even say it that way, but that's what it was. And
that's pretty amazing, considering if you think of the idyllic image of a very studious academic person, now all of a sudden doing this drawing of the chancellor with his head cut off. I mean, that's pretty dramatic change and shift in perspective there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, I wanted to do stuff that was a part of a conversation, I think. Yeah. And people were talking about it, and for me, I think my punchline in that one was something like, which one do they want, your mind or your body? And I don't think I put it as succinctly as I just did, but that was the idea, was you come to college not to get a great body. You come to college to get a great mind, and then go do cool things with it. Or if your school's allowing Playboy casting,
You got that too?
You got that option. So I just wanted to play with that duality and of like mind and body, and what are we asking of young women? So to decapitate the chancellor just kind of felt tame, honestly, compared to that. But no, I got called in on a lot of my cartoons by the editor, and I like wore that like a badge of honor, man. I loved it. And was
it sort of like the editor would come to you, get in my office now with a smirk on his face, sort of thing, or her face?
They would definitely call me in, and more of it wasn't a no, it was always tell me how to justify this to my editor.
Wow.
Like sell this to me.
It's actually quite good.
Yeah, it was awesome. DTH, the Daily Tar Heel, was an awesome environment. I think newspapers really took a turn after I graduated, so I hope that the student that culture is still there to raise journalists. I haven't really I haven't been in the newsroom since graduating. That'd be maybe kind of creepy to show up one day, but it was a really cool environment, and I was only going in to meet the editorial editor of the editorial page. But the whole office was just like thriving. It was really cool. But yeah,
what did you pull out of that? What do you feel like what did you learn as an artist and as a person, being in that kind of environment, and in that kind of construct too, where you were challenging ideas and had authority figures basically saying, tell me why we should not punish you. In fact, we should let people know why it's important that you do that. Yeah.
I think it was just how powerful an image could be. Like, so with what I was saying, going back with Side of the P being really my greatest hit up until that point, I didn't really, I liked it. I had fun with drawing and making images, but I didn't really ever see I didn't really ever see how serious it was, or what really role it played socially or in a bigger purpose. Sometimes I still kind of pinch myself when I'm working on client work, and I'm like thinking, wow, I'm drawing for a living. Like, it's kind of crazy. And then I think, oh, well, people write for a living. People read for a living. People, do things that are sort of basic skills you learn in grade school. Just do it really well and do it for a great purpose. So I think that's where I started to see that, it was kind of, I guess that sunk in and really gave me where I wanted to go. Like, I was studying sociology and I was writing papers, but then my senior year at UNC, I convinced one of my, I shouldn't say convinced, I mean, he was pretty open to it, but I asked one of my professors if I could do a comic for my paper instead of, just a written paper. And I was really struggling with writing back then for a lot of different reasons, but he said, yeah, and it allowed me to really just explore that further. And I remember some of those panels really clearly of like having a really emotional, or having like the same way you might have a paragraph in a paper and you're really wanting to make a point. And so to see where it's like one image, like a decapitated chancellor, like that's going to hit people, And so that the way an image could do that, that really was probably the biggest thing.
Why'd you get into sociology? It seems like there's some connective tissue there.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I thought that I wanted to do is in terms of major in college was international studies, which I honestly still don't know what that does exactly. If I met an international studies student now, I'd be like, what do you do? Or what do you want to do? And so I think I was just sort of like undecided from freshman year. And then I studied abroad first semester sophomore year. I went to South Africa for the whole semester, and I was just blown away in good and bad ways. Bad probably in just that I was being challenged. Nothing bad like that.
That happened to you directly?
No. Yeah. My roommate got held up by somebody and then gave the guy a hug. So that was like the worst story we had from South Africa.
Sounds like a good story. It
was, yeah. He survived and everyone was happy and the thief got a hug.
Yeah.
And some of his money, I'm sure. But he was fine. but no, I think it just really that experience challenged me to. So this was 2002, and we were kind of like, I worked at a radio station, and every day I would go in and I would check to see if we had bombed Iraq yet. Mm-hmm. Had I been in the U.S., I would not have done that. I would have heard about it. Like everyone was aware of whether we were going to go to war with Iraq. Yeah. But it was so salient for me being an American overseas. Yeah. And that experience really just made it unavoidable to be aware of and be responsible for how I connect with the rest of people, not only people directly around me, but people worldwide. I had people in South Africa do not play around, man. Their sense of humor is so just biting, and I was a shy, polite Southern kid. And so it really just tore me apart for the first while, and then I got used to it. But an example was, I had a friend who he would not call me. His nickname for me was white people, not white man, but just white people. Mm-hmm. And so, you walk into a radio station every day where I was the only, up until the German kind of visiting DJ left, I was one of two white people while he was there, but then I was the only white person in the station, and and I was the only white person on the bus ride in. I was the only. South Africa is incredibly segregated, de facto still. Yeah. It's definitely getting better, but apartheid was brutally
fresh, still fairly fresh. Yeah.
Yeah, fresh, and when it was in place, it was brutally effective. I mean, it was patterned after U.S. segregation, but it just was amazing. I mean, just demographically, 10% of the population trying to control 90%. Yeah. And so it was. I was aware. I was learning about all that. That is patterned after U.S. segregation. So I was very aware of growing up in the U.S. South, of what I had experienced. I was bused, thankfully, all through elementary not all through, but through middle school. And so I was drawing on my own life experiences, just taking in everything around me, very aware of politically, the people, even if I hadn't voted for them, that were what they were doing worldwide, how the people around me were not like liberal people in the U.S. just hoping we don't go to war. They were protesting in the streets of Cape Town, not for my country to go to war with another country. Yeah. It affected them that directly. And so coming back from that, I took a sociology class, I think, and I realized you can study this stuff. You can study why this all is happening and how what is power? How is it used? How do we experience things that we when you listen to the radio, what's happening? You've got your favorite song. Who owns the rights to that? Who promotes that? Who owns the station? There's all these things that were just sort of looking behind the curtain that I just felt not only looking behind the curtain of my experience, but it started to make me aware of, when you do that, you get aware of so much more of other people's experiences. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with that. I just felt this responsibility to do something with it. And sort of the same way, I guess, drawing and art was for me too. It was just something I loved and felt very connected to. Didn't really know what I would do with it. And editorial cartoons were where it really started to mix. And then, that's where then after UNC, I went to do a second undergrad degree, which is a really...
you ran through about 17 universities. I was looking on your your timeline.
Well, so Duke was part of the UNC thing. That was gotcha. The same experience. Yeah, I was really fortunate to be in a great program, the Robertson program, between Duke and UNC. Let me meet my wife and let me study 2D animation. They had a phenomenal 2D animator at Duke.
What? At Duke?
Yeah. Of all places. So taking that class was just how much...
You couldn't get a major in that at Duke, could you?
No. The most you could do was, and it's what I did, it was called a certificate in film and video. So they have a film and video department, which was under the literature department. And so they offered one animation class, intro to animation. It was mostly animation to teach as a filmmaking practice. and just sort of so that filmmakers who are studying film are aware of the history and the tools. They had an Oxbury camera. I don't know if you're
no.
So it takes up a room a little bit. It's about the size of this room, and the thing's huge. And you come in, and it's maybe not Disney, but it's like an old animation camera. It had
you have the plates, and you put the cells in between the plates to take a picture of it. You take that one out, you put another cell in, and
yeah.
And
you got all these metal cranks that you like move the camera up and back by like fractions of degrees and all this. And that's what we shot everything on. Nothing digital. And
so you guys were doing cell animation?
All paper, cell. Yeah.
What?
It was amazing, man. It was so cool. And yeah, so you got to find a lab partner. My lab partner is like, she's a badass. She's working. Last I think she was with Sony ImageWorks doing some crazy stuff. Yeah, that's it right there.
We're taking a look at it.
It is really cool, man.
That's amazing.
It's so old, though, that one night, so you had a lab partner to help you because you need a second set of hands sometimes to get through longer assignments. You got to shoot all this stuff by the deadline. You get like an hour or something to shoot the smaller, like 3-second assignments. And so you get assigned a partner to work with, so you get to be, you kind of know each other's habits and that. On your final shoot, you get to do a 30-second piece. And so
it wasn't full animation, though. Were you doing like animating on twos or something, or what were you?
However you wanted, but yeah, you could if you were crazy. Try to bite off a lot. But she did this gorgeous piece, man. She was really inspired by South Park. She did all this like moving cut paper stuff, and
it was
that's
super awesome.
Super political. It was about pigs and sheep and politics. But that thing, I left. So you'd go help, and so she was you'd stay if you had you get it for 24 hours when you're shooting your final piece, and so you were kind of expected almost to stay up for 24 hours to have a chance. And I would go to check on her, make sure she was all right, if I need to bring her food or something. And so one of the times I left, it was like the final push. She's like, all right, I'm just going to muscle through from here. And the next thing I heard, I didn't hear from her, and she fell asleep while shooting. Landed on a wire from that camera, and it started electrocuting her, gave her internal burns, and she had to go to the emergency room. And I saw her like a day or two later, and she's like, tells me all this. I felt like the worst animation lab partner ever.
Dude, she probably never talked to you again after that, huh?
She offered to build me a computer. She's a genius, man. She's
she's also the most forgiving person I've probably ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So, so then, so obviously animation is a really important part of it. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was, now you're a freelance illustrator. Is that what you would call yourself, a freelance illustrator? Yeah. Fast forwarding, as time has evolved, I mean, it seems like you're still trying to mold those two pieces together, almost two wings of the same bird, where you've got the sociological aspect and the illustration as sort of a mode to express that part of yourself, right? And that's one of the things that we were talking about bringing up today. And how did that, obviously it's an ever-evolving thing, but how did that evolve for you? Because I kind of feel that way myself, in a lot of ways. I have a lot of different influences, but in my heart of hearts, I would love to be more involved in some of the things that I really care about and apply that to some of my illustration work. And I just recently did an art show, and some of the pieces there were a little bit more on that bend. But what I would assume is the bigger challenge is when you're a freelance designer and you're doing this for money. The big challenge is being able to continue to do that. Most of it will probably be independent, like stuff that you would do on your own, but you might not be able to. Well, let me ask you. I mean, do you find that it's difficult to marry those two in pieces that you do for client work, I guess you could say, rather than your own work that you're building on your own?
I actually don't find it that difficult. And there's definitely, when I'm very aware, because I do personal work on the side, it lets me be very clear in a lot of healthy ways, I think for any freelance or non-freelance, if you're working for a company like full-time, be very clear on when you're hired to do something that, you've got to be very responsible with that trust and that opportunity, and make sure that, it's for your own benefit. I mean, it's what's going to provide your living, but because I do personal work, I'm able to give the appropriate level of care when I need to, and look for opportunities to have some form of self-expression, because you are asked to express something too. You're not just a total robot,
right?
Or else
they're calling on you for that specific expression. They hire you for Brittain's work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think as a freelancer, you probably have more ability to define what you will be asked to do than if you're working full time, because you do kind of wear the company hat more. Your work does express the company's voice more than it probably expresses your work. And I know that because I've worked in agencies and worked in-house. But even there, I'll give you some examples of some ways that just small ways that I found that I feel I've done that. So Wanda Sykes has a new
Netflix show.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
So good.
She's great.
Yeah.
And so the part where she's talking about how she thinks Black people need a better PR agent, PR campaign.
Uh-huh.
She's like, man, we just need billboards of, Black people doing things like taking out the recycling,
right?
Or Black people like bowling,
right?
To show that we're not a threat,
exactly.
like we're just people. And that sounds silly, it's a joke, it's funny, but when you look at the just rash of, you've got police killings now, but you've also got, thankfully, white fear is being called out really clearly now. Yeah. And I think cell phones have just allowed, we've heard of the idea of like microaggressions, like people talk about, going to a store and being followed around, or being asked where the men's clothing section is and they don't work there, but people assume they do, maybe because they're not white. Or, just other experiences that used to just be things that then, if a person of color shared that with a white person, because the white person never experiences that, they just don't even know it. Yeah. And they're like, nah, you're exaggerating.
Right.
Or, oh, yeah, that happened to me too. It's like, not the same, It's like, I don't know but now that we've got these cell phones and we can get all these things on camera and then blast it online, you're seeing a lot of, the sort of a meme now of like white people calling the police on Black people just being people, like having barbecues, it's crazy. Like you see the things that come up that a person got the police called on for. And thankfully some police are even like showing up and they're like, I'm sorry, like I don't need to be here right now. Like he's allowed to do that.
Right. Amazing.
And so with with all that going on, and that is our kind of larger social context, like, for me, if I'm doing an illustration, I did an illustration for my last full-time job. I was at Republic Wireless, and I was doing an illustration, and it was about, there's all these illustrations.
And you were an illustrator there?
I was.
Or was it something else?
So my title was Creative Services Manager.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know it took some time I had to research it to figure out what it was.
That's never a good sign.
I knew what I was doing on a day-to-day basis, but I just never heard that title before I had it. But that was, taking my skill set and fitting it into a context that I obviously had a lot to offer, because they didn't have a lot of this. They weren't used to my skill set.
Right.
So I saw it as an opportunity, and I did. I tried to define it the way that I felt I best could. So I did a lot of illustration, and looked for, and that experience really showed me ways that illustration could really prove its value. Yeah. If I could get engineers not to come up and say that they liked the illustration, it's always a good pat on the back to be like, oh, I liked your illustration, but to say that, oh, it actually helped serve
it
serve
works.
A purpose.
Right.
Yeah. So I had one, not this one I was talking about with the expression part, but like we were trying to get email open rates to go up. And so I came up with an idea to do changing illustrations over the course of a year, just to give people something different to look at when they looked at their monthly billing email. And people were like, hey, it's working. People open them more. We were doing this. I was proposed a series of illustrations to just sort of show that some key aspects of the company's identity. And one of them was that we listened to customers. And so I did the illustration. I love like mid-century modern kind of aesthetics, and for a lot of different reasons. But so I did this guy in this Eames chair, this really kind of sharp-looking gray suit, some kind of brown dress shoes, and he was going to be reading the opinions page. That was the expression of we care about people's opinions. Right. We listen. But he was cool, right? He was sitting back. He was reclining in one of the coolest chairs ever made, and he's smiling. He's reading the opinions page, and so I made him black. There was nothing that said he had to be black. There was nothing that said he couldn't be black. But things like that I do that very intentionally because of things like I did it. That was years ago. But when I saw that Wanda Sykes thing and she was saying, we need some better PR, I now think that it's almost like a, not rebellious act, but it's a necessary act for better social awareness, I think, to just see, I think it's not probably an exaggeration of me to say the default there would have been to make a white guy. Mm-hmm. When I say mid-century aesthetics, sitting in an Eames chair, cool business-looking dude, that, and this isn't just my opinion. I mean, you look at movies, you look at James Bond, you look at all these cultural symbols we have, and it's usually white guys. Yeah. So to just put a black guy reading the paper became, it helps, I think, within what Wanda Sykes was getting at there of let's just normalize who we are. And I think that's why when we have movies like Black Panther or the new Miles Morales Spider-Man character, those things are big, and it's not just big for kids who identify because they are that same skin color, but it's also big for white kids. Yeah. Growing up in Greensboro, years later, and I remember some people that I would meet from other parts of the country would say, "Hey, you're from the South. How do you not have like these stereotypical racist views?" I was like, well, it's actually kind of harder in the South to be racist because I had a black principal, I had a black bus driver, I had a black teacher. You can have black mayors, black. There's just more people that the racism doesn't make any sense. You've really got to hold on to it ardently, and in spite of everything around, all the truth around you of people that are in positions of power over you, that are they're your friends, that you go to school with, that you drive next to. Yeah. You've got to be holding a lot of ignorance of a lot of truth that's just kind of jumping up at you constantly if you're going to be racist. And that's just...
And yet it prevails, so...
It does.
Yeah. So it's interesting, though, and I think I probably should note, too, that Brittain is a white guy. We should be clear. So, and why I think it's important that we say this is because, I was talking about this actually earlier, and I think that artists have. I wouldn't necessarily say that we have an obligation that adds undue pressure, and I don't think it's actually factual, but I think that as an artist we have an opportunity to change people's hearts and minds, because there's this intangible thing that can happen when you're creating art where people find themselves in what they're viewing, right? Or what they're listening to, if it's music. And I think you and I are similar in the sense that we, my perception of you, and maybe I'm wrong, but my perception is that you are a person who truly cares about people and solving a lot of the, pain that we have on the planet, right? And so you're not coming at this trying to out woke somebody, right? You're coming at this from a sense of like real compassion, and that you feel like there's something inherently wrong with looking down at somebody because they're different than you, and that there's an opportunity to send positive messages about that dynamic through your artwork. I just wanted to put that out there because I do feel I identify with that. I'm a Latin guy. My family's Puerto Rican, and I've had to deal with my own stereotypes of, me being Latin, me not being Latin enough. Well, which one is it? And so it had to make me really think about like, okay, well, what is my worth then? What is my value? And so my value is more about, like MLK said, it's about the content of your character. And so I always put that forward facing whenever I'm interacting with somebody, because I know the pain that I feel myself about rectifying who I am as an individual, with Puerto Rican ancestry, and what does all that mean? And so I know that everybody else has similar feelings. We're all humans, so we all have a level playing field of having, these mixed bag of emotions that are being impressed upon us by other people and society and culture and parents and all that kind of stuff. So, being an artist right now, it helps me think about how I can use that in better ways to bring people together.
Yeah, I think we are similar in that way, and I appreciate you kind of calling it out as it's not a woke battle, like a woke contest, because I think maybe in some good ways it is kind of trendy, like if it's cool to want to change it, that's good, it's better than it not being cool, but no, it's to me it really is like, I've noticed in art and in Kerry James Marshall, who's a painter, he really just pointed out the racism that still exists in museums. And he's like, I'm painting, I'm not like, he's like, why is there still an African-American painting wing? I mean, I get the idea that we need we need to recognize that. But he's like, I don't want to be a great African-American painter. He's like, I want to be a great painter. Yeah. And to me that it's like, one of the things I get out of that is just by a lot of people, when you start talking about race, they're like, oh, it's uncomfortable for white people. So the first kind of defense mechanism is to compartmentalize the threat. It's like, oh, there's a racial conversation happening. So if I make art or if I do something and race is in any way a part of it, it could be seen as illustration, like race illustration, right. Racial illustration.
Right. You got to find a category for it.
Right. And what I find the opposite is, let's say that I only put white people in everything I ever made. I'm having a race conversation without trying, And so when I go watch like Indiana Jones now, or when I watch James Bond, or when I watch anything that we take as normal in the U.S., and I think traveling really pointed this out to me. When you get outside of what we consider norm and you look back at it, you realize how unnaturally white it is. And you look at Mount Rushmore, you go to Washington D.C. Like, thankfully now there's a gorgeous museum right next to the Washington Monument.
Unfortunately, I've not been there yet.
I've been to D.C. twice and still haven't been to it. So don't be
and a
kind
local architect.
Yeah. And we should be very proud of that. I'm sorry,
the architect, Freelon. What's his first name? Phil Freelon, who just passed away, unfortunately. What a great, amazing architect! My God.
Yeah. No, one of the things I've read from him that really kind of inspires me is the idea that he wanted to create greatness for everybody. Yeah. So like when you go to the Durham Transportation Center, I've heard other people say this, like, why does Durham have such an awesome bus stop, or bus station, and not a bus stop, but bus place. And that was his point. He's like, why not? Like,
exactly.
Yeah, it's not probably the wealthiest people in Durham that pass through there, but make it badass. Like, make it a really gorgeous building. Like, and things like that do uplift. Like if you.
That's one of the reasons why I loved Black Panther so much. Because you go to you go to Wakanda, and it's like the most amazing architecture, the most amazing technology. That whole paradigm of, just shifting that whole focus, saying, no, we have amazing things here, My best friend in college, and we also played music together, was a guy named Cujo. He was from Ghana, West Africa. And we were super close. We were best friends. And he passed away, unfortunately, really young, like right after he had his first child. So we still celebrate him every day. But anyway, he impressed on me the amazing African spirit that when I saw that movie, man, I cried for like half of it, because it was just like it broke so many molds, It's like, it was that was just incredible. But anyway, to your point there, it's really cool to see somebody like Phil Freelon doing that, because it really is. It is doing art, doing good work for everybody, but it also impresses on the people who are of that certain community too.
Absolutely, yeah. In the U.S., white people are the majority. But when you look at U.S. movies, especially, they are made for the entire world. And when you watch Indiana Jones, when I watched Indiana Jones as a kid in North Carolina in the U.S. as a white kid, it felt very normal. It felt right. It felt like this is the way the world works. And then as I get older and I look back at it and I realize that kids in India and in South Africa and Ghana and in Brazil are watching this. And it is the ideas of whiteness that are made normal in that just become really glaring, and so I almost feel like it makes it seem like, instead of what kind of normally would be the norm of putting white people in things, and you expect to see white people in the hero role or like in an illustration even, just because it's the normal thing. And I'm not making that up too. I've been asked in client projects sometimes, to change people to be white. And it's always interesting to hear people's reasons, but it's a thing. This happens now. So I know that it is sort of seen as the default. And from where I'm coming from, when you do look at the world in a bigger way, but first when you see that what we have in the U.S. is all a creation, it sounds very Matrix-like, but what we now know of as normal was all the work of artists and artists who inspired policymakers. The whole idea that the Birth of a Nation was first movie screened at the White House, and the idea of telling history in lightning, I think was the quote that the president said. Those are all very intentional acts to create a norm that we are supposed to now not even think about. And so to a simple thing of just, when I'm doing an illustration, and I did one for Mother's Day recently, and I think it was one of my best. I really loved it, and it was just it's a mother looking at a card that she got from her child. And then this is for a power company in Texas. That's my client. So I always try to put the presence of electricity in the image. And so her shadow is being cast onto the wall behind her with an electric light, which you can't see, but it's, you can see the light of it. And her shadow is her much younger. Her hairstyle is different. She's a little thinner, and she's holding a newborn instead of holding a greeting card.
Nice.
So yeah, the race of that person is completely doesn't matter. It could have used a white woman. I could have used any ethnicity. But to just normalize non-white motherhood. You know, it's like I made that. I turned it into an opportunity to do that. And if a white person, you know, were to see that and think, Black people send greeting cards to their moms too. It's funny, but that's how growing up in a segregated city, de facto segregated city, in the 80s, we are that far apart in a lot of ways, and how little we understand how normal our experience, how similar our experiences are. And the Wanda Sykes joke, I think, is getting at that. But
and I think generally speaking too, I think one of the cool things is that the arts world tends to be, and it's growing. This is increasing the art world in general, whether it's theatrics or, you know, theater work or TVs or movies or TV and movies or comic art or whatever, advertising. A little bit further down, an extension of the art world. You're having more people in a position of power, and going back to this idea of you know, being more aware of these issues as being cool, you know, a little bit more trendy, quote unquote. You're seeing more people in positions of power within TV, movies, advertising, music, where they're of wider range of a diverse group of people, right? And races. And so it's giving more opportunities. Like, I'm starting to see more and more mixed couples in commercials now. I'm seeing Asian people in movies and TV as lead actors, lead roles now. And so it's definitely getting better, thankfully. But you know, obviously there's still much more work to be done, and it looks like you're doing the good work, helping to move that forward. We're getting close to the hour, unfortunately, but man, we got pretty deep there for about 30 minutes. I think we got some really awesome stuff for people to think about and talk about. And we'll have to do a part 2 at some point. I say that often. It's because I always have many more questions to talk about. So before we wrap up, it'd be great to know what you're working on now and what we should be looking out for. And then also maybe we could find, you could talk about where people can find you.
Cool. So now by some intention on my own and then some just luck, I'm working on some comics. And that's kind of a step towards the ultimate for me, which is making animated films. But it's really storytelling that I care most about. And I love doing that in a single image, but just the pacing, the kind of the larger worlds you can build, and with characters and humor and just different situations that you can in a comic, I'm really excited about. So my first attempt, I'm trying to be honest about how little I know with it, is like it's an assignment, basically. I'm taking
personal assignment.
Yeah, totally personal project. Yeah. I'm taking the Fugees' 1996 Ready or Not music video and making it into a comic, primarily because that video really, as a 14-year-old kid in Greensboro, that video was one big step for me in starting to see the world bigger. You know, you've got this group called the Fugees, and they're talking about refugees in the world. That wasn't my experience. I went to school with some refugees. Right. So I just really want to kind of pay tribute to that. And so that comic I'm really excited about. And I'm actually going up. I'm not going to have a table. I'm not going to be selling it. But I'm going up to Small Press Expo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that expo, man. That is so cool. I went there with George Hodge.
Oh, cool.
A few years back in Bethesda, right?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I'm envious. You're going to have a blast.
Yeah, I knew I would be kicking myself if I went and it was just a spectator. So I'm not going to have a table, but I just want to kind of guerrilla style pass these out.
Yeah. Okay, so you're going to have that ready by then.
That's the goal. Yeah.
Whoa.
And just be, you know, even if it's just giving out some form of it, I'm going to be a part of a community, you know. And I could just go as an observer, but I really want to have some stake in the game, you know. And then thankfully, too, these are all client projects, but just got they're very, very just starting, but it's cool. I'm learning a lot in doing that assignment work.
Yeah.
but I've been asked to do some comics for a client, just totally on the faith that I guess can figure it out. But it's harder than I thought.
Is it a writer?
No, this is I think it's an investing company.
Okay.
So some legit client work. But I'm excited when people want to, I've done some illustration recently for we're working on it, but it's for a research group at UNC about opioids. Really meaningful work, and just the conversations have changed how I view drugs in this country.
Yeah.
Just to do the work to set up to do the illustrations. So hopefully I'll be kind of sharing that work really soon. And it definitely involves everything we've talked about with representation. And you can't have a conversation about drugs in this country without looking at, things like our prison policies and our law enforcement and just how drugs have been incredibly, unnecessarily racialized.
Yeah.
And disproportionately unfairly so. But so that's a project too that I don't know when it'll be when it'll be published, but yeah, those are some of the things I'm up to. Yeah,
that sounds awesome. Can't wait to see that. Tell me about where people can find you.
Instagram's probably the place I kind of use the most, and that's there. And then I have a website that's due for an update. But I just try to use everything as just my name, Brittain Peck.
Okay.
There's not many Brittans out there.
Yeah,
so
you should clarify the spelling.
It's 2 T's, so just like the country, but with 2 T's. Brittain, and then Peck like the chicken, or Gregory.
I almost called you Gregory earlier.
It could be worse.
That's true.
He's a debonair.
Yeah, no doubt. Just like you, man. Just like you. All right. Well, listen, man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This was a blast. And again, thanks for doing the good work. And this is really inspiring to me, and I know it'll be inspiring to others. So we'll catch you soon. Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, man. Take care. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Pencil Pushers Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at the Pencil Pushers Podcast for visual representation of our guest artwork, topics discussed, and anything else that contributes to the show. Be sure to subscribe. Tell a friend. Tell lots and lots of friends. Become a leadhead. And we're out.